This is 8.5, multiplying and dividing real numbers. What is the purpose of multiplication? How could you rewrite 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5? Well, there are 6 5s, and instead of writing that out 6 times, we could write it as 6 5 times. How could we rewrite -5 plus -5 6 times? We could write that. We could say that we have 6 -5s. So we know that a positive number times a positive number is a positive number, and a negative number times a positive number is a negative number. So if we were to multiply 6 times 5, we would get 30, which is the same thing as if we added 5 to itself 6 times. And if we were to multiply 6 times -5, that would give us a -30. Because again, it's the same thing as adding -5 to itself 6 times. So what happens if we if we multiply a negative number times a negative number? For example, if we had -6 times -5. Well, that statement doesn't make sense, so we can rewrite it as a negative, or the opposite of 6 times -5. So if we have 6 times -5, we get -30 from before, from what we did just a minute ago. So a -30 is really a positive 30. Therefore, a negative number times a negative number is a positive number. So if we were to multiply -6 times -5, we would get a positive 30, because it's the opposite of 6 times -5. Now, if we have an even number of negative signs, then let's see what we would get. So if I were to multiply, let's do 2's, -2 times -2, that's an even number of negatives. That would give me a positive 4, right? Okay, so if I were to multiply -2 4 times, well, -2 times -2, that would give me a positive 4. And then this -2 and -2, that would give me a positive 4, which together would give me a positive 16. So however many negatives I have, if it's an even number of negatives, my answer is going to turn out to be positive. Okay, so what about an odd number of negatives? Let's say if I had -2 one time, well, of course, that's a negative number. If I have -2 3 times, -2 times -2, that would be a positive 4 times -2, and then that would give me, excuse me, a -8. So an even number of negatives gives us a positive answer. An odd number of negatives gives us a negative answer. Okay, so let's apply that rule. If I have a -6 times a positive 12, a negative times a positive is negative, and that would give me a -72. All right, -12 times -4, that's an even number of negatives. I'm going to get a positive answer. Negative times negative is positive. And we know that 12 times 4 is 48. So it's a positive 48. All right, a positive times positive is going to be positive, and 9 times 8 is 72. Okay, here we have negative times negative times negative. So we have an odd number of negatives, 3 negatives. So we know that our answer is going to be negative. And if you forget the rule, just go negative times negative is positive, and then a positive times the negative would be negative. Okay, so let's multiply that out. If I multiply negative 1 times negative 3, that would be a positive 3. And positive 3 times negative 2 would give me a negative 6. All right, anytime we're multiplying several things together, if there's a 0 in there, my answer is going to be 0. 4 times 0 is 0. 0 times negative 5 is 0. Okay, number 6, we have a decimal in here. And I always like to rewrite it when I have a decimal. I like to stack them on top of each other. So I have this negative 1.4, and I'm multiplying it times 5. So anytime I'm multiplying with decimals, don't worry about the decimal. Multiply first, and then we'll put the decimal back into the answer. Okay, 5 times 4 is 20, and I need to carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5, and then I add those 2, so I get 7. I multiplied a negative times a positive, so it's negative, and then I see that there's 1 decimal place in here, so I have to put that 1 decimal place back into my answer, and there it goes, and so my answer is a negative 7.0. Now, when I am multiplying fractions, I do not need a common denominator. I just multiply the top times the top and the bottom times the bottom. Okay, so let's start out and figure out what our sign is going to be. Is it positive or negative? We're going to have a negative sign because negative times positive is negative. Multiply the top times the top, that's 10. The bottom times the bottom, and that's 18. And anytime I can reduce my fraction, I need to do so. This can be reduced. They're both even numbers, so we know they can both be divided by 2. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So a negative 5 over 9 is my answer. Okay, for number 8, again, if I'm multiplying, I don't need to worry about the decimals when I'm multiplying until the end. So here I just see a 2 times a negative 2, which would give me a negative 4. Here we go, negative 4. And I see that there are 2 decimal places. So I need to stick 2 decimal places back into my answer. All right, so there's where the decimal goes. And since I didn't have anything in that spot, let me write it a little bit better. Since I didn't have anything in that spot, I need to put something there, and so we put a 0 there. So my answer is negative 0.04, or 4 hundredths. Okay, number 9. This looks a little intimidating, but it's really not that big of a deal. We know whenever we multiply ones together, 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is just 1. Okay, so let's not think about the negatives yet. Okay, so all of these are 1s, so these 1s are not going to change anything. If I multiply 1 times itself, I get 1. If I multiply 1 times 2, I get 2. Okay, so don't worry about the 1s. Let's just worry about the numbers that are not 1s. Okay, so these numbers right here, 2 times 3, that would give me a 6. And then if I multiply it times 1, it's still 6, right? Okay, so now all I have to figure out is what my sign is going to be. So remember, an even number of negatives makes my sign positive. An odd number of negatives gives me a negative sign. So let's see how many negatives we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's an even number of negatives, so my answer is positive, and I just get a positive 6. Number 10 says find the product of negative 4 and 1/4, negative 1/4. Okay, so the product, what does that mean? Multiplication. Okay, so I want to multiply negative 4 and negative 1/4. Well, anytime I want my whole number to become a fraction, all I have to do is put it over 1. So now when I do that, I can again multiply top times top, bottom times bottom. So a negative times a negative is positive. 4 times 1 is 4. And 1 times 4 is also 4. Will that reduce? Yes, that reduces to 1. Because division and multiplication are equal operations, the rules for dividing are the same as multiplication. So, if you multiply or divide, same signs, the answer is positive. If you multiply or divide different signs, the answer is negative. Okay, so let's divide. If I divide a positive 48 divided by positive 4, let's divide this. 4 will go into 4 one time. And then 4 will go into 8 two times with nothing left. So 12 is my answer, and it's going to be positive because I divided a positive by a positive. Now that we know that 48 divided by 4 is 12, we know we're going to get the same answer with the rest of 2 through 4. All we have to worry about is the sign. Okay, so negative divided by positive would be negative. So that's negative 12. Negative divided by negative is positive 12. The signs are the same, so my answer is negative. A positive divided by a negative is negative. The signs are different, so my answer is negative. And then this is written out long ways. So this is saying negative 4.9 divided by negative 0.7. So when we're dividing, we can't have a decimal in this number. So we got to get rid of the decimal. To get rid of the decimal, we would move it one place to the right. So if we do that out here, we have to also do it with this number. We can't do it to just one number. So I'm going to move it right here. So let me rewrite that. So now that I've moved the decimal, I really have a negative 7 and a negative 49. Okay, so now I can divide. Negative divided by negative is positive. 7 will divide into 49 7 times. And that would give me negative 49, and that's 0. Okay, so this just equals 7. We don't have to put decimals back or anything like that since we moved them in both terms. This is an equivalent expression. Okay, so what is the quotient of 36 and negative 6/10? What does quotient mean? Quotient means to divide. Okay, so if we divide 36 by negative 6/10, again, we have to move this decimal. So here, the decimal is understood to be after the 6. If I move the decimal to the right, there's nothing there. What do I need to do? I need to add a 0. Okay, so now this is 360 divided by negative 6. Okay, so we know 6 will go into 36 6 times. And also a positive divided by negative is negative. Okay, so then that would be, and here, just in case that didn't make sense earlier, we always subtract this number. So we're subtracting a negative 49 from a negative 49, which would make that positive, so they cancel out. Okay, so this would be negative and negative, that's positive 36, but when I subtract it, I get 0, and then 0 times, and so my answer is negative 60. Now, to divide fractions, we have to multiply by the reciprocal, which is also called the multiplicative inverse. We talked about additive inverses before in a previous lesson. So now we're going to talk about multiplicative inverses. So the reciprocal means that we flip our number. So if I were to take the reciprocal of 3, how could I flip 3? Well, remember I said any whole numbers, we can change it to a fraction by putting it over 1. So now if I flip that or take the reciprocal of that, I get 1/3. What is the multiplicative inverse of negative 1/4? It's going to stay negative. When I flip it, it doesn't change the sign. But when I flip 1/4, I get 4. So the multiplicative inverse and the reciprocal mean the same thing. We just flip it. So when we are going to divide fractions, we have to multiply by the reciprocal. So the first term is going to stay the same. In number 7, this first term is going to stay the same. And then we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second term. So the sign stays the same, but we flip the fraction. And then we can multiply straight across, top times top, bottom times bottom. Now, to make things a little easier, we can always reduce. Anything in the numerator can be reduced by anything in the denominator. So if I see something that will divide, I can do that and it makes my number smaller. 5 will divide into 10 2 times. And 4 will divide into 16 4 times. So these are ones now. So now if I multiply, first of all, a negative times negative is positive. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. And that would reduce to 1/2. Now, if that's confusing, you don't have to do that. You can multiply straight across. If I were to have multiplied straight across instead, let me redo this. So this would be a negative 4 over 5 times 10, negative 10 over 16. So that would have given me a positive 40 over 80, and then that could reduce to 1/2. So you get the same answer. I just had to go to a really big number before I did that. So whatever you're more comfortable with, if you want to reduce first and then multiply, or multiply first and then reduce, whichever way you like better. We get the same answer either way. Okay, so then for number 8, always the first one stays the same. So we have 4 over 5. We change it to multiplication, and then I flip the second one. So this is going to flip and become a negative, excuse me, negative 1 over 2. Okay, so again, so I could reduce this. 2 will go into 4 2 times, and then a positive times a negative is negative. 2 times 1 is 2. Anytime I cancel that out, that becomes a 1. 5 times 1 is 5. And that's my answer. Or again, if I were to just multiply straight across, 4 times negative 1, that would be negative 4. 5 times 2 is 10. And then I would have to reduce, and that would become a negative 2/5. So either way, we get the same answer. Now, what is the difference between these two statements? I see a 0 in my fraction, but which one, what do these mean? Do they mean the same thing? No, they don't. Here, when the 0 is in the numerator, this equals 0. But if the 0 is in the denominator, then we say that that is undefined. Now, you may get confused about which one's which. If we were in the classroom, I always like to do a visual where I hold up a book and I say, okay, so if this is my book and I'm holding my book and I don't put anything on top of it, but I'm holding it, so I have something on the bottom. If I don't have anything on top, that's okay. My book is okay. But if I have my book and I try to set it down on nothing, it just falls to the ground. It makes a big, loud noise. Okay, so my book can't be set on top of nothing. It won't stay there. So that's undefined. But it's okay if I don't put something on top of my book. So that's just a way to remember which one is 0 and which one is undefined. So which number on the number line does not have a reciprocal? The only one that we can't flip, the only one that would become undefined if we flip it, is 0.